you look, we had a little over $2 gas last year. Now we're over $5, and that has a lot of people amped up.
Welcome to the Circuit Magazine, the #1 source of information on protection matters, the industry-leading magazine for all security professionals who want to stay ahead of the game.
Working in the energy sector as executive security or executive protection. Today, John Moss and myself, we are delighted to be welcoming Don Sylvest, former security operations manager and executive protection advisor at ExxonMobil out of Texas. Big topic, energy, very, very topical at the moment, John. Why are we excited about today's episode?
Well, I'm excited because I've never worked in the energy sector in any capacity. There has been opportunities in my career time. Energy's been a big thing, and obviously we've had the Iraq oil fields and so on. It's never been a place that I've worked in, so I'm really interested to hear about this and get the experiences of somebody like Don.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of places to slot yourself in as a protector. You could be protecting people upstream, downstream, in the refineries. You could be looking at insider threat. You could be looking at travel risk management. You could be looking at all sorts of areas of the energy supply chain. And I'm sure you'll find a different flavor, which is why it's so great that we're welcoming Don, because he has worked all over that energy sector. What do you think we're going to, sort of investigate? Because I think rather than just blindly saying, what's it like in the energy sector, what do you think will be of real value for our listeners?
Well, that's a great question. And when I think about the energy sector, there is a tendency to think of it as a big black hole because I've not worked in that area. But ultimately, we know what protection is. We know what security is. We know that it essentially comes down to either protecting people or places. And so, as you just said, with the energy sector, there's different things, different areas on that range, on that spectrum, and that's where it's more nuanced and different perhaps to a different industry such as the financial sector and so on. So it'll be really interesting to get those different perspectives so that it can paint a picture for the rest of us who haven't worked there.
And that's the key, isn't it? Because it's a hot topic. People are interested, but maybe they don't know where to start. Obviously, very political at the moment, the world over, prices here, prices there, and sort of availability. So certainly a lot of scope to investigate. Now, it's not just Texas. I know we're inviting a Texan on board, but this is a topic which I'm sure people will find synergy with the world over. So let's get into it. Welcome, Don Sylvest, former security operations manager at ExxonMobil, and we'll investigate the energy sector for you, our fantastic protector community.
And now, let's meet one of the contributors to the Circuit Magazine.
Executive protection in the energy sector. Today, we are honored to welcome Don Sylvest, former executive protection advisor and security operations manager at ExxonMobil, currently security consultant. It's a pleasure to have you on. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, John and I are thrilled to have you on, and I know you've spoken at many Texas events, and you have a great perspective in this sector of the security industry. So let's get into it with our sort of 3 quick-fire questions to enliven the debate, so to speak. So number one, what's the sort of current state of play with executive protection in the energy sector? What's the problem that you think perhaps needs to be solved and addressed?
Well, I think activism is probably one of your biggest concerns in some of your activists that really want to bring harm and damage to infrastructure and to executives are probably some of the greatest concerns in the energy sector.
Very good, very concise. And maybe we'll explore that throughout this podcast. But what about you? Obviously, we know why you're here and we're very pleased to have you. But can you tell everyone a little bit about your background? Where does your passion for this sector come from?
I started in law enforcement at a very young age and migrated from Louisiana to Texas in the early 80s. And back in the early 90s, there was during one of the presidential elections, I had held rank with the sheriff's office in East Texas, and I was asked to participate in some of the protection of one of the candidates that was running for president at the time. And so that did intel because of our backgrounds in the area. And I was assigned to a narcotics task force, and our intel backgrounds in East Texas and such. And watching these guys do the protection around the presidential candidate stuff really piqued my interest in that at that time.
And what about the energy sector? How did that come about?
When I retired from law enforcement, I moved up to Dallas, and I wound up working for a high net worth family, and actually wanted to travel a little more. And it was just kind of a happenstance that someone called me up, and everyone knows that I work for ExxonMobil. They called me up and said, "Hey, ExxonMobil, the guy that's the president right now is about to become the chairman and the CEO. And would you like to submit your resume? They're looking for a protection guy for him." And I said, "Sure, why not?" Here I am.
Perfect. Well, that seemed to align beautifully. And then what about the protectors out there who have not yet worked in the energy sector and are completely uninitiated in sort of that field? What should they better understand about working in energy?
That's a really great question, and I believe it applies to every industry. If you're interested in the energy industry, then you need to go look and see what their challenges are. Who are their adversaries? Who are you looking at? Who are you protecting against? Because over my years, activism was a big who we protected against. There were some employees and employee groups that were activist as well, as far as union labor and that sort of thing, that would have a gripe against upper senior management and that sort of thing. Then when you, not as much here in the United States, but when you travel out of the country, then you're looking at a much higher profile as far as kidnap threats and that sort of thing as well.
So Don, I'm just wondering right off the bat, so you've obviously spent a lot of time working in the energy sector. How does that compare to other sectors that protectors commonly find themselves in? What are the big differences? If I've never worked in the energy sector. If I was to transition across tomorrow, what are the biggest pointers that you could tell me to sort of ward me off, to prepare myself for that adjustment?
For lack of a better analogy, I'm going to use a police officer and a fireman. Everyone loves a fireman. They rescue the cats and they do all the really fun things and everything. No one likes a police officer because, police officers are there to arrest you or to take action against you. Firemen don't. Energy sector, the oil and gas companies are there. Everyone looks at these high gas prices as their fault. It's your fault because we have high gas prices. I can't afford formula for my baby because I can't afford gas to go get it. It's your fault. Some of the other, you get some of the other sectors, probably health, probably financial sector, not as much, because there's just not as much controversy around them as far as the climate change. There's not as much, as climate change is probably one of the greatest controversies going on right now. And you never hear of financial services corporations being involved in climate change or not involved in climate change and that sort of thing.
That's a fantastic analogy, by the way. I don't think you could have painted a better picture. Really got to the heart of it very quickly. Really appreciate that. So Given what you just said there, and that's not something that I'd really considered myself, how long did it take you to adjust to that? And what techniques, research, tools did you add to your existing toolkit from those experiences to help you adapt to working in that sort of environment?
So let me share a quick story with you. In 2008, ExxonMobil in Nigeria had a convoy that was attacked by a guerrilla group over there, so to say, and they were requesting armored vehicles for the group, and what could we do to better protect our workers that were going back and forth along the route. So my boss came to me and said, hey, I would like for you to go over there and look and see if we need armored vehicles, think outside the box, look at everything you can and see what we need to do. So I'm going to fly to Nigeria. I fly into Hartfield Airport in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm sitting there to catch my next flight overnight. And we're talking 15, 20 years ago now. So I was relatively young back then. And there was a 65-year-old woman sitting there, and she and I, there was no one around us. And we're having the best conversation. And she says, so honey, she says, who do you work for? And I kind of looked to the right and I looked to the left, and I said, I work for ExxonMobil. Guys, she jumped 5 feet in the air and looked like she stayed suspended there for 5 minutes and went to cursing me for everything she could think of. She says, I haven't bought gas from those SOBs since the Valdez. They are the scourge of the earth. They're the worst of the worst. That was a turning point for me. And the biggest thing I learned was from that point forward until now, I'm proud of who I work for now. I never told anyone who I worked for or what I did. I always went, I resorted back to my narcotics investigator days and assumed a different personality, a different persona. I was someone else whenever I traveled and did my work and that sort of thing. And that's one of the things that you have to be very low key about what you do. And that was my greatest takeaway is to be low key.
Yeah, totally. I think it's unfortunate, isn't it, that in our industry, a lot of the time it really pays to be slightly withdrawn, to be the grey man. And I say it's unfortunate only because, the ability to share our experiences in a larger community, which is obviously one of the things that we really try to do here with the podcast and the magazine, it's really to everyone's benefit. And the more that, we can share, but of course we're always tiptoeing around these areas, and we really appreciate you, being so open on the podcast today so that others can learn from this experience. And from that, I think that's a pretty much an open and closed book on that one. What your takeaway was, just, don't talk about it so much. But so I'd like to move on to the area of activism and perhaps even hacktivism. We might get onto that later. But now this is a more nuanced challenge. This is a lot bigger. What was your approach to this, and how have you seen the threat of activism on this sector? How have you seen that change over the years that you worked in the energy sector?
I think when in early 2000, with them in mind, and I think it is late. I think when the activists went to the home of the chairman and CEO of Shell over in Europe, if you remember that, they went to his house and into his yard. I believe you see a much bolder activist now than you did say 10 years ago. I don't think people are as concerned about their actions and the consequences of their actions now as they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I think they've become bolder in what they're going to do. And I believe they feel in order to, well, you take some of the protests and stuff that you see that we saw in the past couple of years against law enforcement, and I can see some of the same kind of things, activists doing the same kind of things toward the energy sector. Is we have to burn something, we have to blow something up, we have to make you see us to hear us. And we're going to go to the extreme, and extremism, activism is probably what would be the biggest thing, is we're going to do something to make you pay attention to us.
Yeah, and at your sort of level, because, let's not forget, primarily, your biggest focus is your principal. I assume, anyway, that it's a person or a group of people. And so this just adds a whole nother dynamic or several, aspects to that. So you already, committed and very watchful, looking after their physical protection and all the things that can affect them on a personal level. But what you're talking about here is even bigger than a company. It's a whole sector. It's
Yes.
a way of life.
Yes.
So what sort of techniques can you employ to help guard against this threat, and in the different ways in which it can emerge and affect you?
Proactive intelligence gathering. I think you have to. I think everyone involved in it has to be involved in the intelligence gathering. Everything from intelligence gathering can be as simple as reading current events in the news and on the internet and stuff, and see what the mindset is in an area that you're going to. And I think that's one of the greatest things that. One of the biggest things that you need to do is know where you're going and understand the area that you're going to, and what makes the people tick. I had a very high level executive one time he was very knowledgeable. He was probably one of the best business negotiators that I've ever seen. And he and I had couple of discussions about it, and he told me that one of the things that he did before he went somewhere was he read as much as he could about where he was going, the culture of the people that he was dealing with, the people that he was dealing with, if he could find personal information out, and then I said, okay, well, that makes total sense, because that's the same way as conducting a police interrogation. A good police interrogator is going to speak with the person for an hour about themselves before they talk about a crime. If they're good at what they're doing. So the same thing applies. The more you know before you go, the better off you're going to be.
And I think that really brings it to life. And at least at some of our executive protection events, we have welcomed people who specialize in protest intelligence, and there's lots of technologies and fun gadgets that people are sort of offering, by data aggregators. But zooming out a little bit and going back, I think, to the some of the original questions about how today's operator will find the energy sector. Is there a difference between upstream and downstream? And particularly, I'm thinking of places upstream or downstream that are more exposed, because we've heard of the Colonial Pipeline cyber attack, and we've seen exposed pipelines in foreign countries. You mentioned Nigeria. People are siphoning maybe some oil, or they might be doing something else. But upstream, downstream, and that whole terminology might not be second nature to the operator. But I feel that there's an important distinction for them. What advice would you have in that context?
Well, you're gonna, most of your downstream facilities are refineries and that sort of thing, and they're going to be in more urban areas. As far as your upstream, your wells and your pipelines, and you're going to be in more rural areas. So, different. What's out there? What's the infrastructure like that you're looking at? And how is it most affected? Is it a pumping station? Is it is it a terminal somewhere? And we've had threats against terminals and that sort of thing whenever I was with Exxon and that sort of thing.
And going back to sort of technology and the promise of the gadget or the threat intel software, a lot of people are saying, well, use this and it will make your life a lot easier. I'm wondering about your thoughts. Moving to the future of the energy sector, will we be employing robots? Will we be employing more drones? Obviously, because you can't get to all parts of the pipeline at once. How is technology going to evolve with the protector? Because I think in this sector it is prime to be used, but obviously that's just my guess.
They're using more and more drones now from a safety perspective as well as a security perspective, and yes, gadgets for that sort of thing are great from an executive protection standpoint. I'm gonna kind of stay a bit old school when it comes to executive protection. I will go back to research, knowing where you're going, and your intelligence gathering before you get there. Even if you're going to one of your facilities, you can still have an insider threat in executive protection at one of your facilities and such. You just have to. You have to have a good, strong background in reading people, body language, and that sort of thing. It's, you can have all the gadgets. You can be an expert marksman. You can know all kinds of martial arts and how to take people out and everything. But if you can't read someone and understand body language and that sort of thing, you're still going to be behind the curve.
Don, I know you're very well traveled, and obviously working in the energy sector is going to take you to, a real variety of places, and a lot that, until you've been there for the first time, you'd be very unfamiliar with. And you're talking there about these old school methods, which, personally, I really appreciate. I think it's really important that we keep those foundational skills really strong, even if the channels that we're using to get that information perhaps are more new school. I think there's still a very old school approach to doing that, investigative research. And so I'm just wondering, in the energy sector, obviously, it's a very rich sector. I feel anyway, please correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like obviously, there is money there to be spent. I would imagine there's a decent budget. So what sort of tools did you have? Support? Did you have intelligence people who would supply that? Or was this like literally, all done yourself? Was it your own initiative, I suppose, is what I'm asking.
And your first statement there, John, was great. A mix of old school and new school, because we have a lot of new tools at our disposal, at our hands that we can use to gather our intelligence before we go somewhere. Facebook, social media, all these different things. And to the second part of your question, yes, we did. I won't delve into it too far, but yes, most of your major energy corporations are going to have some sort of intelligence group. You have to have somebody that's sitting at the helm most of the time, looking at everything that comes across, and either you're contracting with somebody to bring in that intel and stuff. But at the end of the day, they're feeding you this stuff. At the end of the day, it's up to you as the practitioner to look and see what else is there and what, human error. Did they miss something? Did something just not pop up on the radar? We've had activists show up in rural areas before with us when we were maybe the chairman was speaking at a luncheon or something of that nature, and we've had activists, university settings as well, would pose as reporters or, want to ask a question. And you know who your intel people are going to know who they are. they should, whether you're employing somebody, as I say, contracting with someone should know who these people are. They should have some kind of profile on them or an idea of who they are and what they're about and everything, and know that they're prone to asking activist type questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine in many ways, again, never having worked in the energy sector, but that, I come from a military background, you come from law enforcement background. In both cases, we're used to working on teams with support. There's good infrastructure, yes. And we know the value of communication. It's all about communication. You can have all those assets, but if everyone's not speaking together or in the same language or at the right time, then it's to no effect. And I think, from many of our listeners listening to this will be quite an alien concept, bar, them harking back to their, service backgrounds if they have them. But for a lot of us now, we're out there on our own, maybe on a small team, maybe working one or two up. And I think the idea of having this level of support, would be massively welcomed. But it's no use, is it, if the communication's not there, if we don't know how to use it and share it in a timely fashion?
Absolutely. That is yes. I totally agree with you. Unless you're communicating with your team, and you're right, it takes a whole team to manage all this. And coming from our backgrounds, we had a lot of military. We've always combined military and law enforcement in a lot of groups. And that's not to say that someone comes up, insecurity is not worth their salt. They are. They know what they're doing. They've been doing it just as long as we were doing law enforcement or military. But if you don't communicate with one another, you're spot on. You're gonna have failure, and that's not gonna work out for you. And every team member is just as important as the other team members. It's just like a football team. It takes all 11 of them to get that quarterback or that running back the ball and to do things. And it takes everyone to be a success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine it's a two-way feed as well, because you're the guy on the ground, or you're the guys, the girls on the ground, and you're seeing stuff firsthand. So obviously, I imagine there's a huge download of data coming at you. But then you're the people who can say, is that still the case? Is that still relevant? Has anything changed or updated? So I imagine the flow of data coming back from yourself is just as important. Did you find that to be the case? Was that well received?
Yes, and that's another really good point, is you have to have really strong after action meetings. You need to sit down and even if you have to call someone at night and say, hey, I saw this today, and are you familiar with this? Can you look at this? Can you tell me, is there any changes to this? Is this someone that we need to be looking at or something like that? This guy seemed a little off to me. Do you know anything about him? Could you look it up for us? Yeah, you really have. It flows both ways.
And Don, you happened with John before on, it takes a team to solve a problem. Teamwork is the dream work type of thing. But I think there was also an element of duty of care, especially towards your operators, making sure the right person is in the right place at the right time. And I was wondering if the energy sector is a really good example of duty of care, mainly because just from previous experience of different energy companies, not yours, health and safety was almost a daily requirement. Some people had to report on other people, and it was that important. And you hear, of course, on the rigs offshore, people have to hold handrails going straight forward and things like that. And maybe that's an extreme case, but I guess, is the energy sector a good example for people to sort of mimic in terms of duty of care?
Well, I'm not sure of other corporations, but we had to do a physical every year. We had to they checked us every year to make sure that our blood pressure wasn't high, that we weren't morbidly obese and that sort of thing. And that clear of mind, and the whole spectrum.
Oh, that's encouraging. I like that, and it really does play into the duty of care topic, which is, I think, John, I'm not mistaken in thinking it's really become a big topic this year.
Yes, it has. It has become a big topic. I believe that when you see positions that become available in other sectors and that sort of thing, all the way across, you see a lot of them that want people that are really fit for the position and everything.
And talking about current news, current affairs, obviously this podcast will go into the canon of the Circuit Magazine podcast, and we'll forever reference it when we're thinking of the subject energy. But since we have you here, it'd be lovely to get a bit of word on the street, I suppose, with the changes in the economy, with fears, with expectations. What's the outlook, or what's the feeling in the security world, particularly in Houston and other Texas energy centers?
Yes, I have to think about that one for a second. That's a really good question. What is the outlook? I think there's so many uncertainties in our economy and in the outlook on life in general with all the different people are a little stressed with all the shortages that we're facing. And I think that people are more aware of security. I guess from a security perspective, we should be more aware of the anxieties that are going on with and as it goes to the energy sector. You look, we had a little over $2 gas last year. Now we're over $5, and that has a lot of people amped up. People are just really, really anxious about what's going to happen. And unfortunately, our country has become a bit of an extremism from the right and the left. And you have people that are I'm not trying to espouse any political views here, but you have people that are far right that are prepping and getting ready for the end of times and that sort of thing. And then you have people to the far left that they're protesting against the high prices, against against some of the energy sector, and it's their fault. It's your fault that we don't have this. It's your fault that we're in this position. And I think you have politicians from both sides, not just one side, from both sides that egg a lot of that on.
And that paints an important picture, and I think that people would see that reflected in their own geographies as well. And I suppose that could then lead us on to the question, I suppose, of possible insider threats, maybe with a downturn, some terminations, maybe some hostile terminations. What do you think, John? Do you think we should explore that in the context of EP?
Well, one thing is, unfortunately, but it is the nature of the beast for the industry we work in. When a sector is being hit hard, when there's a lot of threat and pressure against it, when the landscape is changing and becoming more uncertain, it creates a greater demand for people in our profession. And so whilst none of us are happy, I mean, this affects everyone, okay, especially the gas prices, so none of us are going to be happy about that. But if we're looking where the next opportunity is going to come from, these are the indicators that we're looking for. And so we can use this information to, as Don has said, to be proactive, to do our research, to okay, what do I need to know about the energy sector? If I'm going to present myself like the way Don got his opportunity to put himself forward, obviously you're going to brush up, and I think really that's what that's what protectors who are ambitious, who are on the the look to to move around in the industry, to get a wide gamut of experiences and skill sets. These are the things that you need to be looking out for. And so, times are hard, but, okay, what can we do? We got to work, and where are the opportunities?
Perfect. Well, I think this is, I know that there's a limit to how much you can reflect on specific companies in the industry, but I feel that this is very worthwhile, and I think maybe, Don, if we were to reflect on some of the things we've pulled out of today's session, what do you think our lessons would be for the protector that hasn't yet stepped into energy? I know there's a lot of things to do with activism and things like that, but what can we do to sum up, Don?
For the protector that's wanting to get into the industry?
Yes, and for what we've been speaking about on this session.
Again, it comes back to educating yourself about the sector to start with. As a protector, you educate yourself as to what you're getting into. And I guess whenever I first got into corporate security, and I joined American Society for Industrial Security, and I in 2003, I got my certified protection professional, my certification for that. And during that time, I looked at the different sectors as to the pay rates for the positions and what the average pay was and that sort of thing. And, what some of the requirements were for, say, hospital or medical and versus financial versus energy. And for the energy sector, I can speak for the energy sector. Be prepared to travel. Be prepared to spend lots of long hours. People view executive protection as a really glamorous job. It can be a very rewarding job, but it can be very challenging from the travel that is involved and the long hours that are involved with that sort of thing and everything. And I just think that if this is an industry and a sector that interests you, research it, look at it, and seek out people that are there and learn from them to best prepare yourself for it.
Lovely. And are you open to people reaching out if they're interested? Yes,
I am. I am open to it. We were on that panel the other day, and I mentored law enforcement officers many years ago that were thinking about getting into corporate security, and how could I help them and kind of guide them along the way. And some of what I just said about looking at the different sectors and think about what it is you want to do. Do you want to do executive protection? Do you want to do investigations? Do you want to do an insider? I think everyone, the energy sector, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the energy sector probably has more of a insider threat programs than a lot of the other sectors do. Because I think the energy sector is probably one of the larger sectors, is it not?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, John?
Yeah, it certainly feels like that. Because, in addition to all the executives, the corporate side of it, you've got the infrastructure side of it as well. A very different job, but it's still the energy sector, right?
Sure.
And the energy sector, we're not just talking oil and gas here, we're talking energy. And now we've got so many new ways. We haven't really touched on that. We got so many new ways that we're exploring getting energy. Some of them controversial, that will raise issues in itself as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
absolutely. Well, I feel if we go any further, we'll get into the specifics of some of the controversialities. And I don't want to push too many bears or poke too many bears. But I think people understand the complexity that you've had to operate in, and therefore I'm very, very appreciative that you've come on today to sort of help lift the lid, help shine a light, and maybe there will be operators out there thinking, do you know what, this is a new passion for me. I want to go into energy, which is always delightful when. And if you are, please do let us know, because it's always nice to see cause and effect with what we're trying to achieve here.
Yes.
So what's next for you, Don? Are you going on any big trips, any training courses, any programs?
Uh, I have a really fun side hobby, and I'm just kind of focusing on that right now. And just I don't have anything in the wind that is in the near future. I'm doing some consulting and some helping some energy sector companies with their executive protection programs and providing some guidance and that sort of thing. Yeah. I was asked a week or so ago if I would mind driving an executive. They were not energy sector. They were totally different, pharmaceutical, actually, I believe is what they were. And I said, sure, I'll go pick them up as a more or less a favor. I'll go pick them up at the airport and take them where you need to take them. And so I picked them up, took them to the hotel. A couple of days later, I went back to the hotel and picked them up and took them back to the airport. And, as a security driver, you really don't engage your passenger, your principal, unless don't speak unless spoken to. That's probably the best thing I can tell you. But the person engaged me in conversation, said, so what is your background? And we started a conversation. And I told them what my background was, that I'd been in law enforcement and who I'd worked for and that sort of thing. And something else was said, and I said, well, I see that you are this person who is the CEO of XYZ company, and this is the size of your company and what your company actually does. And that person was like, I said, I don't mean to sound like I'm a stalker or anything. And they said, oh, no, it means a lot that someone would take the time to look and see who I am. And a really good point here is take the time to get to know who your principal is. You need to know who your principal is and who you're protecting, sometimes to know who your enemies are. So your enemies aren't always readily visible as activists and that sort of thing. They could be someone from personal life. They could be someone from past life and that sort. So I encourage people to know who you're protecting as well.
Love it. Well, that's sage advice, and I think that's a positive note to end on. I'm encouraged to join the energy sector, and I really think that our community should at least give it a look. So, energy and today's, and in fact tomorrow's protector. It's been a pleasure having you on, Don. From John and myself, this has been another fantastic edition of the Circuit Magazine podcast. Well, thank you very much to Don Sylvest. I feel like we've had a tour de force around Texas, around the energy sector, and around why this is so crucial for you, the listener, today. Are you excited, John? Are you going to go and work in energy?
Well, I don't know if that's going to be my next step. I think at this time there's some really great opportunities for protectors to be targeting this sector. There's lots of work there. Obviously, like we spoke about in the interview, whenever an area comes under a lot of scrutiny and criticism, it's going to need some level of protection, or it's going to need multiple levels of protection. So this, does create opportunities for people in our industry. So I think, as an industry on the whole, we work in this area, and like it or not, we have work when things are unstable, when the threat is high, and we accept that. And so, here is another avenue for protectors to work in. And I think if, as Don, really emphasized, if you're prepared to do the work, the research and the investigation proactively, you can really put yourself on the front foot with moving into an industry like this.
And with such a large corporate footprint, I have seen personally examples of protectors move in at one level, but there's scope for progression internally. And so maybe it could be your first step into the world of corporate executive protection. Maybe you're a long-standing corporate executive security professional. But this is certainly an interesting dynamic. And I know every industry has its own nuances, its own flavor. And on the podcast, I mentioned health and safety and duty of care. This sector really does embody that. And I joked, but I know of colleagues in not a company that Don has worked for, but another one, who literally have to hold a handrail whilst walking straight forward on a rig. And you're like, why? Well, they take this into consideration. So that's an extreme, but it's nice to see an industry that would provide more duty of care for protectors. But of course, this is wider than just Texas and wider than oil and gas, electricity, transmission, renewables, production, refinery, bunkering. There's so many different angles that I feel you could get quite lost in it. But I don't know. What do you think we can take away from today's session as to where the protector can start?
Well, it's wide open. I think that, and I think that's one of the good aspects of today's interview, is to realize that you don't need to be necessarily highly skilled in one particular area or have a vast knowledge of the inner workings of refineries and so on. But you can relate your experience, whether that's in the corporate world, whether that is more high risk, whether that is executive travel, and so on, and see how your experience relates to one of these different areas where you could be placing that experience inside of the energy sector.
I like it, because that leaves it wide open for people who have never worked in energy before, pricks up their ears. They think, do you know what? Maybe this is now for me, which is always good as a listener. That's what I'd like to hear anyway. But wider than this, what have we got coming up? I know we've just released an issue of the magazine, and we're doing some great work on the app, aren't we?
Yeah, there's lots going on with the app. I'm not really going to get into that right now because it's a bit technical for one thing. And I kind of, with these developments, I always prefer to talk about them at launch rather than, to build up too much excitement. But there you go. We've put it out there. There's definitely some good stuff going on with the apps that anyone who's in our communities will benefit from in the very near future.
Which is as true for the NABA Protector app as it is for the BBA Connect app. Obviously, very much closely aligned. I'm really loving the EPHQ, although I know a couple of sessions were left out recently. But the EPHQ on the NABA Protector app, that's been really good news. So thanks for everyone who's chimed in there. On my side, I've been doing a lot of online events, many interesting geographies. And in fact, there have been some BBA and NABA members joining those. So thank you very much to everybody who's participated in some of the more unusual geographies, especially in the Caribbean recently. That's been a highlight for me. But yes, I think energy, Don Sylvest is definitely going to help us out when we do another Texas event. I think there's all to play for, and I'm really excited about the summer. From John and myself, this has been another fantastic edition of the Circuit Magazine podcast.
You have been listening to the Circuit Magazine podcast. Be sure to subscribe and be sure to not miss an episode.